Hey folks, it's Rob Flux here with another Sunday session, and tonight it's open mic night, which means it's your chance to ask me any question to help you on your property development journey. Now, in order to do that, you need to click on the link below, propdev.info/open-mic. Submit your questions in advance. That allows me to do whatever research I need to do in order to help you on your journey. So that said, these are the first Sunday of every single month. We have got a cracking show, having seen the questions that are coming your way. So let's get on with the very first one. The first one firstly comes from Duncan. Duncan says, firstly, thank you, Rob and Megan and Simon for the recent Mission Critical Mindset for Property Development Success Sunday session. That's a bit of a mouthful, but it was a Sunday session all about mindset. So Simon and Megan are coaches within our program. So thank you, Duncan. Appreciate the kind words, mate. His question says, do you have books, podcasts, etc. that you recommend for your mindset? Actually, there are plenty, to be honest, so many that it's actually very difficult to start, but in multiple areas of my life. So, but if you want to get into some very, very simple ones to start your journey, I'm going to say something like Atomic Habits by James Clear. That's going to get you taking small incremental steps towards your goals. Firstly, understanding what your goals are and small incremental steps. Now, the concept here is very simple to understand. Basically, sometimes their goals are so big that they can sometimes seem overwhelming. So what we want to do is create micro goals that are very easy to achieve. By way of example, I want to have some six-pack abs, but I can't actually do that unless I make myself a micro goal of actually putting on my gym shoes every single morning when I get out of bed. Because if I don't put them on, then I'm not actually going to get myself to the gym. So little things like that. That's Atomic Habits, very good book. Other one, if you're looking to understand how to get into the business of property, I'd say Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad book, which talks about the differences between investments, assets, liabilities, etc. And whilst he's talking about long-term buy and hold and not specifically property development, certainly worthwhile to get into that one. From a business and entrepreneurial space, I recommend Ray Dalio. Fantastic, super wealthy man, very, very rich, has his own podcast series himself. And if you're looking for just pure mindset stuff, why don't you try looking at something like Mind Valley, where there's all sorts of things that are going to help you, anywhere from meditations to goal setting to, wealth management. They even have courses on AI and a whole bunch of other things. So great question, Duncan. So thank you very much for that. Next question comes from Bharat. Bharat says, how do I start with no money or less money? Well, I don't know if you can have less money than no money, Bharat, but let's see if I can help you. Firstly, there are 7 different ways to do low or no money down deals. But firstly, you need to actually understand what money you actually need. So in order to get into a deal, there are 3 lots of cash that you actually need. You need a deposit to purchase. You need serviceability to fund the debt, and you need liquid cash to run the deal. So you need to do yourself a self-assessment of those 3 elements of the deal. Now, you actually need those in 3 different stages of the project. So firstly, acquisition phase, where the site is raw and you don't yet have development approval. Then you need construction phase, where you now have your development approval and you're going to take that through to construct. And lastly, you're going to need that for any stock that you may want to keep at the end of the process, assuming that your project is big enough that you can actually do that. So my guidance to you, Bharat, is to actually do a self-assessment and understand where you are going to sit at stage 2 of that process. So if the project I'm actually going to do, what would be the deposit and or equity that I need in order to get into that deal? How much cash would I need to get to that phase? See, a lot of people only worry about the acquisition phase and they forget about the fact that they've got construction phase. So when you understand where your shortfall is, then the next part of the process is to understand the 7 low or no money down deals. Now, I'm letting you know in advance, folks, forward projection, we're going to be releasing a course very soon on no or low money down. It might take another couple of months to get out. There's some work that's happening in the background to try and help you with some insights into how to do exactly this. But those 7 no or low money down deals help you to actually solve elements of those three things that we're talking about. So some of them will solve what do I do when I've got no deposits? Some of them will solve what do I do when I've got no serviceability? Some of them will solve what have I got when I do no liquid cash? Some of them will solve multiple elements of those at the same time. So you may need one or many of those different combinations. Sometimes you might need to put a few of them together in order to make the deal stack. So firstly, need to understand what they are and which ones are going to solve your problem. That's part one of the process. Part two of the process, don't make it about you. You need to make it about the vendor who is actually selling the property. You see, if you think that you need something like a vendor JV or a landowner JV, and you try to force that down their throat and they're not ready for that, they're going to push back on you quite hard and not allow that to happen. Instead, what you want to do is actually have conversations with them with regards to what are their needs, what are they actually trying to do, and understand where they're wanting to go in the next phase of their journey. Now, when you're doing that, it's a conversation. We're not going in with targeted questions to interrogate them, but rather we're just trying to understand their circumstances and what they're looking to do in their next phase of life. Now, when we're doing that, we're looking for little clues. Now, the little clues to try and help us understand a couple of elements. So, for example, time. How much time do they have on their hands? Now, if they have already chosen somewhere to live and already bought that place, then their time is likely to be very, very short because they need to get out very, very fast. Okay. If, however, they have not yet found where they want to go and they need time to find where they want to go, then they may need a lot longer time. So we can use time to our advantage. The next thing, certainty. Some people just feel comfortable with the certainty of knowing exactly, I know exactly how much money I've actually got to spend. Other people might be interested in a little bit of uncertainty. Look, I might get a higher price, but it's going to be subject to something like a development approval or something like that. But if that happens, then they're going to be rewarded handsomely with their cash return. Other elements is risk. Maybe they might want to stay in the deal and share a little bit of the risk and share a little bit of the reward. When you understand some of these elements and their particular circumstances, then and only then can you say, look, I've been listening to what you're saying, and based on your particular circumstances, I think there's a creative solution here. Would you like to hear my creative solution? At this point, you've demonstrated that you've heard them. You demonstrated that you actually care about their outcome, and you're putting forward a solution that is going to not only suit your needs, but it's also going to suit their needs. That is when you're more likely to actually get a deal across the line. Okay, so now watch out for that future course that I've got, the 7 no or low money down methods. That will be coming out probably in the early to mid quarter of next year. So that's 2025. So watch this space. Next question comes from Susan. Susan says, "Hi Rob, I work in the building industry and also work with a handful of investors and developers managing their large-scale developments. So obviously working as a development manager. But how do I get into developing myself if I don't have the capital? I don't know anything about joint ventures, but I know that the entire design, build and construction process plus subdivisions have done this many times for clients. What would you do if you were in my position?" Susan, strangely, that is almost exactly what I've just said to Bharat, and that is understanding that your personal circumstances, that there are ways to do low or no money down deals. Now, in your particular instance, because you've got a whole bunch of industry experience, that's going to look very, very good on your resume. So when you put forward a position to a vendor for something like a vendor JV or something along those lines, you're going to look very, very strong of an applicant compared to some other people who don't have the runs on the board, which means that you might, depending upon how big your experience is and how wide that experience is, that might, allow you to go into slightly larger deals because of that very fact. Now, what I'd recommend for you is you want to put together a little bit of a website that actually demonstrates some of your capabilities, because anyone who's going to be looking at working with you will actually want to do some research with you. So make sure you put a history of what some of your projects were, some photos, that sort of thing, a little bit about your background, your experience, your qualifications, etc., and that will stand you in very good stead, Susan. So it's exactly the same problem as Bharat, but you're just better positioned to be able to add value into that process from a conversation perspective. Equally, I would say to you, Susan, I guess start to learn, firstly, how to find it, how to fund it, because I've seen many people come into our community and certainly into my courses because they know how to run the deal, but the finding it and the funding it part of this is the most challenging part. Anyway, next question comes from Vincent. Vincent says, "Hi Rob, thank you so much for your knowledge and everything that you share with us. Please help me with the following questions." He's actually got two questions. Question number one, if I'm planning to do a joint venture with a landowner who has a big backyard and the project is to subdivide the land and put a house at the back, sell and then share the profits in an agreed ratio. If the landowner has not finished paying the mortgage off the house, can the bank allow this project to proceed? If not, what other ways can be done to get the new build done through commercial lending? So Vincent, firstly, that shouldn't be a problem at all, so long as there's a commercial agreement between the two of you together. In order to go onto any loan, both the landowner and also yourself, there needs to be a beneficial interest to both parties in order to do that. What you're going to find is that the construction lender will want to pay out the current mortgage that the current landowner has. So let's just say that there's $200,000 mortgage that he's actually got, and you've got $1 million worth of work. The construction lender would take over the 200,000 and then lend you 1.2 million so that they've got first mortgage over the property, because they won't want to do this with second mortgage, which means that you've effectively cash flowed 200K to the original owner. So long as you account for that at the tail end when you do your profit splits and say, hey, that 200K, we took over that debt for you, we need to now claw that back. So when you do your profit splits, then you're just going to subtract the 200K from their portion of that. Now, that's a very simplistic way of actually articulating that, but hopefully you get the concept that I'm talking about. Question number two from Vincent. Please, could you give me some guidance on what to write on a letter which I intend to send to property owners whose properties have potential to be developed, i.e. keep the house, the building at the back, and then split the titles? Do I either, so in the letter, should I either tell them that I want to buy the entire property or do a joint venture with me? Should I put the two options on the one letter, or try to sell an option contract with them? What do I put in the letter, in short? Look, Vincent, this is one where I would very strongly caution you to not put your offer in the letter. You do not, under any circumstances, understand their particular you don't understand their circumstances. So how do you know that what you're proposing is actually going to be in their best interests? And they equally are going to see that as a one-sided transaction because they don't understand why that's of actual benefit to them. Instead, it's much better to actually just encourage them to have a conversation with you. So you might put something along the lines of, look, we are in a position where we can do short, sharp settlements and give you instant cash, or where circumstances allow, we may be able to pay anywhere from 5 to 15% above market price, as an example. If you can work with us with the appropriate terms to help us to save money in the deal. Now, you do something nice and simple like that. It's very open-ended. It also gives you many options that you can actually have a discussion about. But what it does is it creates curiosity. Now, these letters should be seen more like an opportunity. If you were going for a job interview, you don't put everything in your resume because you don't want to give them enough information to actually make the decision to rule you out. You want to put enough in the resume to make it curious that they want to have a conversation with you and find out more. So this is the exact same thing. You want to invoke their curiosity and get them to actually have a conversation with you. Now, the other thing that I would say with regards to letters, and this is a common one that I see a lot of people do, they send letters out in a plain white envelope with a clear plastic, and they've printed it with a mail merge or something like that. It looks like a bill. The chances of that letter actually getting opened is very low. What you want to do is do something very creative to make the letter actually enticing. Go to somewhere like Vistaprint or go and get the envelopes actually custom printed for you. Make them look like birthday cards, make them look like wedding invitations, make them look like something would have some curiosity to actually have them open it. Purple envelopes, yellow envelopes, that sort of thing. So it doesn't look like it's normal. Put glitter on it, make it smell like perfume, put something lumpy in it. You want something to open, encourage them to open it, because unless they open it, they'll never actually read the letter. So that's the first part of the process. Then, as I said, invoke their curiosity within the letter itself. Hoping that one helps, Vincent. Next one is for Carol. Carol says, hi, Rob. I listened to the Sunday session on tax depreciation and was wondering if you would get a report done if it's a new build and it's your principal place of residence. I've had them done for many years for my investment properties, but not sure if there's any benefit in this instance. Carol, I guess if it's your principal place of residence, there's no tax advantage to having a depreciation schedule in its current guise, okay? The only reason at all that you would want to do that is if you are getting some form of investment out of the property. So if you are renting one of your rooms or something like that, or if your intention was a little bit down the track to actually rent out the property at that point in time, then it might be of interest to actually do it right now while it's easy to actually generate that depreciation schedule. But if you are just keeping it as a principal place of residence, to the best of my knowledge, there is no benefit to actually getting the report done at this moment in time. But if you are receiving any income from it and you can claim that from a tax perspective, then that's where it would actually come into effect. Next question, Viral says, hi Rob, I wanted to know what an absolute beginner can do in order to learn the property development process. What is the best resource for getting started on day one? Well, Viral, as a matter of fact, that's such a common question, mate, that I've actually created a free course precisely for this, because I get asked this question so many times, it's not funny. So if you go to that link down there, propdev.info/free course, that is going to show you I guess the 7 steps that I put into the framework that I've called the property development formula, that are going to give you the insights into what you need to do in order to become a property developer. Now, it is just the beginning, mate. At the end of that course, I promise you, you're not going to be a property developer, but it's going to give you the insights in what you need to know and just open your mind to how you actually start to think a little bit differently. The other thing that I'd encourage you to do is come to our meetups. We run these meetups all the way around the country. We run them in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide. We also live stream them. So no matter where you're located, you can actually turn up to an event pretty much anywhere. Now, because of that, we are pretty much running 45 events a year. So we have industry experts every single month. We've got town planners, civil engineers, architects, accountants, property lawyers, and a whole bunch more who come talk to you about common issues and challenges and problems that they see their clients have on their journey. We also have members of our community sharing a real deal. So the real deal is the good, the bad, and the ugly of a project, so you can actually learn how to actually solve the problems and actually move forward. Now, I would highly recommend doing that. If you also become an annual member, then you're going to be able to look at a back catalogue of all the recordings of all those industry experts and real deal presentations over a long period of time. So that's going to give you some really good insights into how you can start your journey. So once again, the link for the free course right there, mate. So hoping that helps you and looking forward to seeing you at an upcoming meetup. Next one, next question, whoops, I've got to get myself. So next one comes from Cyril. Cyril says, hi Rob, highly appreciate the time and energy you're putting in here. Thank you, mate. Given the current real estate housing crisis, with thousands of homeless people that can't afford getting into the market until they've worked for 14 years to afford a deposit, is there a possibility for councils to be open for a developer promoting a neighbourhood for smaller houses, i.e. something like a 50 square metre minimum with the aim to make them available to the middle class? So Cyril, I like your intentions here, mate. But what you'll find is that all of the councils and state governments work together in unison to try and understand not only what our population growth is actually going to be, but also where they can actually do those things. And so they design a 20 to 30 year plan as to where regards to where people are actually going to go. And that is what forms the basis of what they do from a zoning perspective. Now, if you're trying to promote something that goes against that, then you're going to have to one, put together some very, very, comprehensive arguments with regards to that, and two, most likely take that through to the state government for the state government to overrule what council has actually put into the area with regards to the zoning. So now the process to do that, whilst it can technically be done, will take you a number of years to actually get that approved, and a lot of money in order to do it. And so the sheer process itself will mean you've got significant holding costs, significant risk that it may actually not get approved, and all of which are going to impact the very affordability that you're actually arguing to do. So what I would propose is go talk to your local council member and get them to understand that there might be alternatives, understand what they're doing from a draft legislation perspective, and work with them for the next draft of what's going through. So that way it's not on your dime, but it's rather on the council's dime. Now, understand that they do put strategic plans together. They do plan ahead. The housing crisis that we've got is not because the zoning is incorrect. It's because from the economics perspective, there's been a long period of time where there's been no development approvals and no construction actually occurring. Now, that's not the fault of the council, that's the economy and all the things that impact in and around the economy. So council is not necessarily going to be inclined to want to put some product in that doesn't really suit the area. So whilst your intentions are good, I think the probability of that getting across the line is probably on the lower side of things, mate. But you never know unless you actually have the conversation. So I would encourage you to actually have the conversation. Now, from those smaller dwelling size things, most councils are going to want to see that sized dwelling, not as a house, but rather more as an apartment, okay, where they can actually do things a lot more efficiently when it comes to car parking and visitor parking and things like that. If you do that as a small house, it becomes very, very difficult, and it consumes a lot of land mass in order to solve those particular issues. Next question comes from Long. So Long says, hey Rob, in your opinion, how or what are the best possible ways to improve the productivity and efficiency of our construction industry to help solve the housing supply crisis in Australia and help more property developers and investors make profits and invest more? This is almost the antidote to, the question that Cyril proposed. What is Rob's magic bullet to actually solve all of this? There's actually a number of things that are actually leading into this. Firstly, the profitability of the deal is probably the most crucial element to this. So supply and demand, there is absolutely a supply and demand mismatch. But in order to make that actually occur, we actually need affordability to be able to construct. We've got some massive challenges in the construction industry with so many builders that went broke during the recent COVID building boom. That actually, it was the boom that sent the builders bust. And that's because logistical supply chains and cost escalations with regards to materials and labor and that sort of thing made all of those deals not profitable. So a lot of builders actually left the industry. So we need to actually rebuild the building industry in order to get them across the line. The other thing we need is we had a window of, I'm going to say 3 to 4 years where we had a lack of development approvals coming through, both because we were in an economic slump before the recession, before COVID, I should say. Then we actually went into a COVID recession. Then the building boom consumed all of those development approvals. And afterwards, there was a slump because of the construction industry causing all sorts of problems. So we've got a window of 3 or 4 years where there's no development approvals actually come through. So one of the things that we should be doing is creating fast track approval processes in order to get that across the line. Now, the place that has done that the best is New South Wales with their complying development codes, but they're trying to make some changes in that because of some inefficiencies in the original version of CDC, and the councils are creating a whole bunch of pushback and had the original planned Amendments didn't get pushed through in the timeline that they were predicting and have been pushed out till next year. But if all states took on board, I guess, the approach that New South Wales have taken with regards to complying developments, getting fast-track approvals, cutting through the red tape, that will be able to get the potential for supply into a market very, very fast. But once we've got the potential supply, then it comes down to, have we actually got the builders to actually do the work? Now, because we don't, we need to start thinking differently with regards to our construction methodologies. Too long have been doing traditional building methodologies where we take a piece of wood and we chop it up and we create a frame and we get an individual brick and we lay it one by one. Instead, we want to be starting to doing prefab, where it's actually able to be manufactured more efficiently, more effectively in a manufacturing plant. Modular construction, they're designed to be cookie cutted and brought in site and actually just plonked in place, where we can actually increase the speed of the efficiency of the actual construction process. Now, it doesn't change the quality and it doesn't really change the cost either, but what it does is it shortens the timeline. So now one builder can build more homes in less time, and what they're really doing is kind of putting together a little bit like Lego bricks. So the factories are able to ramp up and speed up over and above the builders, I guess, in the field. So those two things. Then the last one from a housing affordability perspective is taxes. We need to get all of the state and federal governments out of the way with regards to taxes and actually create some, I guess, impetus for developers to actually be doing the work. The challenge that we've got here is that, I guess, from a taxes perspective, about 40% of all of the costs that go into a new home construction is some form of tax, either directly or indirectly. Now, when I say that, there's application fees for council, there's council contribution fees if you actually get it approved, there's GST, there's company tax for what you've actually done, there's headworks review, there's stamp duty on the way in, there's stamp duty when we sell the finished product to the ongoing person, there's council rates, there's land tax to us and land tax to the person that we're actually going to. In places like Victoria, there's things like windfall tax and vacant land tax and all sorts of things that are actually massively impacting the profitability of that. If we could get rid of 40% of the cost being tax, then we would actually create a much more efficient system with regards to selling property. The challenge with all of that, and where I think the governments have actually got it wrong, is they're trying to profiteer from the individual property at the one time. Now, if I break it down nice and simply, if I'm going to be building a 6-pack of townhouses, then why charge me stamp duty to purchase and then get 6 stamp duties from the people going out? When you know that I'm going to be creating those 6, I'm creating more revenue for you, state government. Why don't you give me a credit on the stamp duty that I created if I create the 6? Similarly for land tax, I'm going to pay 1 lot of land tax and they're going to create 6 lots of land taxes. Why wouldn't you give me a credit for that? Why charge me contribution fees for building the headworks? Instead, you're charging rates to 6 more people forever, and you're going to be able to recoup that over a long period of time. Why not blend that out over many, many years? Now, when we start to think of things a little bit more logically with regards to why are we punishing the ultimate buyer, why are they getting preloaded with all of that, that's where I think the real challenges lie. That said, all of the governments have been indoctrinated for these revenue streams for so long, it's going to be very, very difficult to get them to change their mind. Anyway, end of rant. Next one, Benjamin says, hi, Rob. In a past podcast, you mentioned that the person with the right to buy through an option contract cannot benefit financially by on-selling the property to another entity. Can you please explain why, or could you direct me to a solicitor of the ATO ruling as to why? Benjamin, I think you've actually misunderstood me there, mate. So an option contract is the right, but not the obligation to purchase property at a predetermined price at some point in the future. And in most option contracts, you have the ability to on-sell that or assign that to somebody else. And you can indeed profit from the process. But in some places, and the one that comes to mind in particular is Victoria, the flicking it onto somebody else triggers a double stamp duty event. And that double stamp duty event is based on the uplift that you've actually created in that process. So you need to be extraordinarily careful with regards to that. So options are a fantastic mechanism, and yes, you can, so long as you've got the right clauses in there, you can flick them on for a profit. But note that you may, depending upon where you are, trigger that double stamp duty event. So that profit needs to account for the stamp duty that you've actually got there. Hoping that helps. Supplementary question, with regards to selling property under an option contract, what are the reasons that having a real estate license can benefit you with this transaction? Well, if you actually have an option contract, you actually don't need a real estate agent's license. Real estate agent's license is more if you are trying to become a deal finder. So you're going to be buying properties or acquiring properties on behalf of other people. You need to have a real estate agent's license in order to do that. Okay, so just understand the differences between them. So I think you've just mixed up a little bit of terminology from the previous podcast. Either way, glad I can actually clarify it. Stephen then has a question. To save the most on finance costs and offer the vendor a better price, can delayed settlement with early access cover things like demolition and civil construction, like pipes and pavements, with the vendor's permission? Absolutely it can, Stephen. Conditional on, can you convince them and negotiate that in? Can it go so far as to allow the on-selling of the new vacant lots by me to the next buyer, so I don't have any finance costs at all? Again, that is possible to negotiate. If so, do you need a backup finance approval in case you go over time, or can the settlement before on selling? That one's a little bit more complicated, mate. So let me kind of break this down for you. If you're doing a delayed settlement with early access, it is fundamentally a standard REI, so Real Estate Institute form of contract. So in each state, there is a different standard contract. So in Queensland, REIQ, in New South Wales, REI-NSW, in Victoria, REIV. So each one of those has a standard contract. You would be varying that contract conditions to say, look, we're going to have certainty on the settlement. Before the settlement actually occurs at some point in the future, let's just say 12 months' time, you're going to allow us to come in and do some works. Okay. Now, depending upon what those works are, the vendor might be a little bit reluctant to actually let you do that. So that becomes a negotiation point, because if you, in this instance, you said demolition, if you want to demolish their house, then you've, removed some of the value of their property. And if for some reason you never actually settle, then they're at risk that they've actually lost the value of that property. Okay, so can you negotiate it in? The answer is yes, but they'll want something to ensure the security of, if that bad thing actually happens, have you got some money somewhere, some equity in some other location that would actually allow that to occur? Now, for other things, like you said, to do install sewer and stormwater and things like that, and put pipes and pavements and that sort of thing, well, they're not really detrimenting the property. They're actually probably, if anything, temporarily impacting the value of the property, but the works are usually only very short in duration, and at the end of it, they're actually going to add value to the property. So in those instances, usually not such a big problem. So you might be able to get a majority of the way through the process, but not necessarily all the way, unless you've got a mechanism where you can secure or reaffirm to them that you've actually got the money should something untoward actually occur. And hence the last part of your question is, what if you don't? So could you actually sell the finished product before you own the actual product? Again, the answer is potentially yes, if you've got enough time to actually complete all of the works. But you might be, if you can't demolish, you might have to sell off the plan, then you align everything to occur simultaneously. Now, to make the planets align on that is a little bit tricky to actually do, but not impossible. It comes down to understanding the vendor needs, understanding and explaining to them the risks and what you're doing to mitigate the risks. And once you can do that, then it is definitely indeed possible to negotiate those sorts of outcomes. But you won't necessarily negotiate it with every single vendor. So you're going to have to tread carefully in how you navigate that conversation. Either way, hoping that helps, Steve. So next one comes from Francisco. Frisco says, I'm comparing options between a build on slab solution versus build on posts. To estimate the cost of the first one, I'm using $82 a cubic meter for the cost of imported fill and $300 a square meter for retaining walls and block work. To estimate the cost of build on posts, I'm using 140 square meters for flooring and structural steel. Question number one, is that about right in your experience to cover labor and materials? And question number two, do you have a rule of thumb for what rates for individual costs to be putting for these particular ones? In my instance, my slope is a 9-degree slope, 9% slope, I should say. What would influence your decision to choose one option versus the other? So Francisco, firstly, mate, I would not be trying to do those calculations yourself unless you are very, very experienced as an estimator or in the construction industry yourself. It is prone to missing some major errors. Instead, what you should do is go speak to your engineer and your builder, or more importantly, go talk to a quantity surveyor and get them to do the estimates for you. They understand everything that actually goes into it. They are not going to miss it. For the small fee, you're going to pay a quantity surveyor or an estimator to actually put this together for you. Then that is going to reassure you that you've actually not missed anything and you've got the most up-to-date and appropriate rates. So that's probably the first part of the process. And I'm a developer. I'm not a builder. I'm not going to put that level of detail. I don't care about that level of detail. That's going to change on a daily basis. I don't do enough construction, even with my experience, to say that is going to be accurate. Whereas if you go to someone who's a quantity surveyor, they're reviewing hundreds and hundreds of building contracts per week. So they're going to have very, very clear line of sight with regards to what those costs are and also the process to actually do. That's part one. Part two, your question was, what would be to influence my decision on whether or not I would actually dig into the hill and put retaining and earthworks, or whether I put it on posts? Well, it really comes down to the demographic of the area and also the aspect that you're actually going to get. So if you're on a slopey block and you're overlooking the harbour, then you want to try and maximize the amount of footprint and get the best quality build out of it. So you don't want to be doing cheap construction because you're trying to sell at a premium price point. If, however, on the other hand, you're doing something where you're overlooking, say, a cemetery or something like that, or an industrial area, or just suburbia, and there's no particular outlook on it, then you're going to want to do something that is cost effective. So the actual cost of the construct is not the issue to me here. The issue to me is what is the benefit of doing the more expensive product, and am I going to get a premium price point for actually expending that extra cost? So be very, very careful that cost alone is not the value prop. You're looking for the value that creates as opposed to the cost that actually costs you. So cost is what you pay, value is what you get, and then worth is what you can actually do with that. So how many times can you use that knowledge over and over again? Hope that helps anyway, Vincent. So next one comes from Shani. Shani says, hi all, we're looking at a house that is built on reactive soils. It is sunk down a bit and otherwise in okay conditions. We're looking at getting injection filling under the house rather than underpinning it. Is there any risk that I should be aware of? Thank you. So Shani, firstly, I might just, for the benefit of everyone else, talk about what it is that what your actually issue is here. So the soil being reactive has sunk in some situation, some part of the house, and a part of the foundations have actually sunk. And so what she's talking about is putting injection technology in, which is two chemical compounds that go together, and when they collide with each other, they have a chemical reaction and they expand. So you kind of like the expanding foam that you see go into wall cavities and things like that. And what that does is when it expands, it actually lifts up the foundations and reinforces it. Now, I can say, Shani, that I have actually used this technology myself for a property that I purchased some time ago that actually had some sinking foundations. The process literally only takes a couple of hours to actually do, and comes with a 25-year structural warranty, at least with the company that I used. And so I found that that process was very cheap and very cost effective, whereas underpinning is very, very invasive. It has to have all sorts of structural designs and engineering, and I guess digging and earthworks, and takes weeks and weeks to actually do, and is very disruptive to the entire area. We were literally in and out in, I'm going to say, 4 hours to actually resolve this particular issue, and raise the building by about a centimetre at one end. Now, a centimetre doesn't feel like a lot until you're actually in the property and it's actually sloping. So very, very good technology. And as I said, it comes with a 25-year warranty for the company that I used. So Ant has a question here. Now, interestingly, Ant was at the Melbourne meetup yesterday and actually talked about elements of this one, but this goes into a slightly different realm, so I am going to repeat it here. So Ant says, I recently joined the group and really appreciating positive vibe and helpful insights here. Hoping to get some advice from some more experienced developers to help structure a potential deal. I'm currently working with a good client who owns one of 3 villas in a strata title property. The units share some common land across all external spaces, courtyards, front setbacks, etc., though there's no shared driveway, and the owner's corporation is inactive. Here's where it starts to get interesting. One of the other villas is now on the market. My client has also had discussions with the third owner who's open to selling, though they currently have very high expectations. The value of the combined properties would be much, much higher than the sum of the individual units, as there is significant development potential. It's about 650 square metres in a suburban area. The challenge is the need to consolidate the titles and restructure them to remove the common land, as it complicates any redevelopment. I'd love to hear any thoughts with regards to this. So firstly, the fact that they're on 3 titles with a shared driveway and things like that, mate, you would actually be amalgamating the application to have all of them together. So firstly, you don't need to actually merge them together to be one title. You'd actually have the 3 lots lodging together at the same time in the one application. And then whatever it is that you're creating at the end, and I know from our conversation yesterday that you're looking to put some units on these, they would then be onto the amalgamated lot at the end. So you can actually do that as part of the process. Now, I guess the comment here was that one of those people have much higher expectations than you think the market is worth. But this is where individually you've said that they are worth, I guess, a price, but collectively they're worth a different price. So you might make it conditional on, so if I'm going to pay this premium price, it might be conditional on the fact that we get all 3 of them together, and also conditional on the development approval, in which case I'm willing to pay over and above, but I'm not going to pay today, I'm going to pay at some point in the future, avoiding a whole bunch of holding costs whilst you go get your development approval in place. And then those holding cost savings are effectively passed back to them, I guess, in order to compensate for the higher price. Anyway, hope that helps, Ant. Next question comes from Peter. Peter says, what is a realistic target net profit for a simple 2 or 3 lot splitter? Is it 10%? So Peter, here's where it gets super interesting, mate. If I go and ask the community in unison, if I say, hey, what's the percentage profit on cost that you're aiming for your project? And if I stick my hand to my ears like this, I tend to get the same answer yelled back to me in a crowd of 100 people, and they pretty much all say 20% profit on cost, okay? But there's a huge but here. Most people are thinking about a 2-year project when they're actually looking at that, okay? And so my encouragement to you, Peter, is to actually start to go, well, what would that be annualized? So if it's a 20% profit on cost over 2 years, that's a 10% annualized return. So when you're looking at your project being a splitter block, there's some terminology things here from a splitter perspective I'll go into, but a splitter block is a much, much shorter deal, and potentially going to be in and out in 4 months. So if you're looking at, in this instance, 10% in 4 months, if you annualize that, that is a 30% annualized return, mate. That is a cracking return. So my encouragement to you is start to annualize your returns, compare that against other projects, and then you can work out how hard your money is actually working. So if you can get the 10% on a basic splitter block that goes for 4 months, mate, giddy up is what I would say to that. Make sure that you've done all the appropriate due diligences and everything along the way. Next one is from Melika. Melika says, landscape design for a townhouse project. What do people look for when reviewing design provided by a landscape architect or designer? Do you look for specific things like species in the inclusions, review the aesthetics, the price, all those sorts of things? Very good question, Melika. So firstly, I'm not in any way, shape or form green-thumbed. I don't really understand plant species and that sort of thing. So I rely on my architects and my landscape designers and that sort of thing to actually come up with what are the right species. What I'm looking for is precisely that, the aesthetic and also the price point, to make sure that it is fit for purpose for the market that I'm actually trying to put it into. I also look for, I guess, the robustness of the plant. So we're going through, I guess, a whole bunch of construction phase. A lot of things are actually happening, and then it's still got to look good 3, 4, maybe 6 months later while we go through the sales campaign, depending upon, I guess, the size of the project they're actually doing. So we want something that's going to be hardy and robust and very easy to maintain. So because I'm not green thumbed, I don't want to kill it halfway through. So if you are worried about, I guess, the duration of that, you might want to potentially consider putting in some water reticulation systems, or have some arrangement with the landscaper to come back on a fortnightly basis and actually maintain that while you go through the sales campaign. But for me, I don't really care about the species name. I'm looking at, is that pretty, and does that suit my demographic? Does it fit in with the overall aesthetic of the project? I don't need to be the specialist in everything. I'm going to encourage you to also do the same. Mohammed says, hi team, I've got a CDC dual occupancy question. CDC being Complying Development Code, which is the fast track approval process in New South Wales. Can both dwellings face the same road in a corner lot project? I've got a site with an existing dwelling, which I want to remain as is, and the second one will be facing the same road. As a matter of fact, Mohammed, it's absolutely you can have them on the same road. Most duplexes are both facing the same road. A corner lot is a unique circumstance where you have the option to face 2 different streets. And even that option is then going to be subject to things like your traffic management and things like that, because you don't want the driveway to be too close to the intersection. So yes, it can actually be done, but you're going to have to probably consult with a traffic engineer to make sure that the driveway crossover is an appropriate distance from the corner to ensure that people aren't coming around the corner at speed into a car that's reversing out of the property. So have that, and that should help you at all. Lucky last question comes from Anastasia. Anastasia says, when you sign a contract on a splitter block with no development approval required, what sort of special conditions can you put? Do you need to be able to make applications to councils or have access to contractors, etc.? Anastasia, firstly, let me just help everyone else by telling people what a splitter block is. So splitter block is 2 lots on 1 title. So effectively that is already pre-approved. No need to actually go through a council approval process in order to do that. You just go to the titles office and ask for those titles to actually be separated. Now, it can be done and it's deemed possible to be done, but that doesn't mean that you don't do due diligence. You must do due diligence, and I can't stress this enough. If you have a splitter block, there's a whole bunch of services that are deemed to be accessible. So it's deemed that you can get stormwater, it's deemed that you can get sewer, it's deemed that you can get electricity. That doesn't mean that all those things are physically possible. You need to do all of the correct due diligence processes to actually make sure that those things can be installed, because when you go to sell that finished product to someone else, they're going to want to put a house on it. Now, with regards to applications to council, the only application that you're going to need to go to council with is one to actually get the new dwelling installed onto that property. So, so that's going to be things like setbacks and does it fit in with the character of the area and those sorts of things. So, anyway, hope that helps, Anisha. Anyway, folks, that has been Open Mic Night. I hope you've enjoyed the process. If you want to ask a question, make sure for next month's session, make sure you click on the link below. So propdev.info/open-mic. You submit your questions in advance. That lets me do whatever preparation work that I need to do in order to help you on your property development journey. That said, folks, we also have meetup events that we run all the way around the country. I highly encourage you to come to those. We run them in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide. We have intentions to take this over to Perth in the not too distant future. We also live stream these, so no matter where you are located in the country, we're pretty much running an event most weekends of the year. As a matter of fact, we run 45 events a year, so very, very worthwhile to hear from industry experts and also real deal presentations, plus the mastermind process, plus kicking on socially for drinks and that sort of thing afterwards. So, it is a fantastic environment to actually be in, folks. I would love to see you at one of our upcoming meetups. We're coming into the Christmas break and it's going to be amazing. Cannot wait to see you there. So I'm going to say until then, folks, I'm going to say bye for now. Bye. Whoop, missed the button. Try again.